staff. Good morning to you, fellow guests, and to you, the audience. We live in a South Africa that, despite our democracy, despite our tremendous wealth, we remain one of the most unequal societies in terms of income. South Africa is one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world. South Africa's Gini coefficient was measured at 0.63 in 2013. Simply put, 0 represents perfect equality, 1 represents perfect inequality. So we are closer to perfect inequality than we are to equality. On the 26th of July 2013, delegates from across the length and breadth of South Africa gathered in Soweto to discuss and resolve on the question of what is to be done. We gathered as non-governmental organizations, youth workers, traditional leaders, activists, movements, non-profit organizations, political parties, churches, intellectuals, academics, students, traditional chiefs, headmen, kings, independent councillors, internationalists. In other words, a very broad civil society. And to respond on the question as to what is to be done, we resolved that the economic freedom fighters should be an economic emancipation movement which should be mass-based, associate, and relate constantly with the grassroots and community movements. Anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and most importantly, we would contest political power. Economic freedom fighters will therefore be an independent economic emancipation movement which will contest political power in all spheres of government. We believe that civil society plays a vital role in building and strengthening democracy. Democracy should not just be a right to participate in our political discourse, but that participation should ultimately lead to economic freedom. In other words, we should all benefit from the tremendous wealth that this country has to offer. I think the American Geological Society estimates that our mineral resource wealth is somewhere around $4.7 trillion, 47, almost 50 trillion rands. That's a lot of money. You're all civil society leaders, even you, Wilmot and Max, who are engaged in various efforts, in various ways. So I'm pleased to be able to share these ideas with you. By civil society, I mean the entire range of organized groups and institutions that are dependent or independent of state, voluntary, and at least to some extent self-generating and self-reliant. This, of course, includes non-governmental organizations like the ones in this room, but also independent mass media, think tanks, universities, and social and religious groups. What can the independent, voluntary, law-abiding, tolerant, and pluralistic organizations of civil society do to build and maintain democracy? The basic role of civil society is to limit and control the power of state. Of course, any democracy needs a well-functioning and authoritative state, but when a country is emerging from state oppression, it also needs to find ways to check, monitor, and restrain the power of political leaders and state officials, something that has become quite relevant to South Africa. Civil society must expose the corrupt conduct of public officials and lobby for good governance reforms. Even where anti-corruption laws and bodies exist, they cannot function effectively without the active support and the participation of civil society. You must strengthen democracy by providing new forms of interest and solidarity that cut across old forms of tribal, linguistic, religious, and other identity ties. I'm going to have to rush to the end. It's election time again. Monitoring the conduct of elections, this requires a broad coalition of organizations, unconnected to political parties or candidates, that deploys neutral monitors at all the different polling stations to ensure that the voting and vote counting is entirely free, fair, peaceful, and transparent. It is very hard to have credible and fair elections in our relatively young democracy unless civil society groups play this role. Civil society is not simply in tension with the state. Because civil society is independent of the state doesn't mean that it must always criticize and oppose the state. In fact, by making the state at all levels more accountable, responsive, inclusive, effective, and hence more legitimate. A vigorous civil society strengthens citizens' respect for the state and promotes their positive engagement with it. A democratic state cannot be stable unless it is effective and legitimate, with respect and the support of its citizens. Civil society is a check, a monitor, but also a vital part in the quest for the kind of positive relationship between the democratic state and its citizens. Thank you very much.